This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz. Very excited to be speaking with Natasha Rothwell about The White Lotus. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. And you?
Good. I was listening to our conversation from now almost 3 years
I
ago,
was about to say it's been a minute.
and that was after The White Lotus had aired. That was after you're nominated for an Emmy, and but there was season one White Lotus popular, and then there's whatever is happening now, and I don't really know what exploded so much, especially because, with the exception of you and some of your co-stars, it's all new people. So I don't quite know where, like, when the obsession happened, you know?
I mean, I'd like to think it was me. um, no, but I'm right there with you. It started with season two, where you would say White Lotus, and there would be this echo after Lotus, 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 Lotus. And so, um, I, I think a couple of things might be at play. I think it's appointment television is something that we've been craving. I think as a culture, art is meant to be sort of consumed and shared and talked about and have conversations about and be thought provoking. And it's allowing that to happen in a way that hasn't happened in a very long time. And I also think, Mike talked about, this season feeling like, you know, it's meant to be a tease. It's meant to pull the viewer along a a ride that's allows you to be titillated and excited and not know, and there's mystery, and the journey is the point. And I think that just makes for really, really great television, and creates connection, frankly.
I know you said that if you got the call, you would come back. You obviously got the call. I have to assume you got the call earlier than the world found out. But what can you share of that confidential, likely very early call?
It was so wild. So um originally White Lotus was meant to shoot in the fall of the year prior, but because of the strikes, it got pushed. Um, Fortunately slash unfortunately, I knew I was coming back. So and had read the, like, basically I've been sitting on this for a long time in terms of like being knowing what the script is about. But in terms of just knowing, Mike was in town. That's why I mentioned way back then for it was the Emmys 2020 that were held in 21 because of COVID. And he was in the middle of shooting Italy, and we were all excited because we were all nominated from the year before. And he's like, let's grab dinner. And I thought nothing of it. And um, at dinner, he's like, I'm still in the middle of Italy, but I'm thinking about, what I want to do for season three, and might want to bring Belinda back. Like, what do you think? And I said to him what I said to you 3 years ago, just say when. And I didn't really hang my hat on that. I'm a writer as well. I know nothing's real until pen hits the paper. And a few months passed, he wrapped production and post and started really working in season three in earnest. And I got a call from him. He's like, Belinda's back. And I was like, let me just make sure my passport's ready. And at that time, I didn't even know where. I said yes before even knowing a single thing about the show.
Well, I do think the where is important because I think it's season one, the staff, was definitely very prominent. Murray Bartlett, that's a very over the top in the best way kind of role. And I think certainly season two also. In season three, it's like we have Belinda and she says a lot, but otherwise, like the Thai, workers are all very much in the background in a very different kind of way. And I'm not sure if you sort of felt that or if that's just from an audience perspective.
I think perhaps a little bit of both, but I think that it's with intention. I think every season Mike sort of moves the lens of the story he's telling and focusing in different areas. I felt there's such a stark difference between season one and two. I felt like, Belinda season one, was so powerless. And I felt like in season two, the staff was so powerful. And there's this kind of like power shift happening. Whereas in season three, you do have, Mook and Guy Talk, in a prominent storyline, but it's more about their relationship outside of work, which I think is a beautiful sort of progression of talking about staff and how we see them. And I feel like their storyline this season just really shows an amazing evolution of the conversation having that's being had around, the staff, and how Belinda's there even flirting with the line between staff and guest. I feel like it's just a really kind of, yeah, beautiful evolution of that.
Is it fun going back to work when you don't have any of your friends there? Like, I'm sure you make new friends, but is there like a sadness to it?
And yeah, I mean, I grieved season one saying goodbye to Belinda, let alone to the cast and crew. And I never thought in a million years that I would be able to put her back on again. And I can't help but feel, the phantom limb that is Tanya. Coolidge is a force of nature. I describe her as like trying to catch, smoke. You can't get your hands around her, but you feel her everywhere. And I feel like that's what it is with her this season. Even though the gang is not back together, I do feel that I'm there in the name of Tanya, and it feels like a continuation of that story. And I do still feel that there's an ellipses for her at the end of this season. I don't know if it's my, character that will complete the sentence, but yeah, she's a force of nature and lives on for sure.
Are you happy with Belinda's choices, or do you feel like she probably could have done things a little bit better in this season?
Listen, I think Belinda's human. And I think that is an important thing that Mike did by making her a bit flawed. And I don't mean in the way perhaps you think, but certainly where most of social media has thought that her not taking guy talk, or sorry, not her not taking porn chai with her was her enacting sort of the sin of wealth and forgetting, this guy that she had promised to help, which she didn't. For me, I think the dirt on her is taking this blood money. There's got to be karmically a comeuppance with that. And I'm a little nervous for her, if I'm honest, but I think that it's wonderful to show her humanness in that way. And who wouldn't want a reprieve from thinking about money all the time? I think back to before I was able to, like, pay off my student loans. I thought about money constantly. And I remember I wrote this check to myself when I was in the peak of my school debt, credit card debt. I graduated with a theater degree during recession kind of debt. And I wrote it for $30,000 and I carried it around in my wallet just so I could see it and hope for someday being able to take that money and pay that off. And I couldn't imagine not thinking about what comes next and how to feed myself. And so Belinda given this money, it's a reprieve of epic proportions. And I think that I understand her choice, but I do think that money corrupts absolutely. So we'll see how that plays out.
We also see a very interesting mother-son relationship, just where the dynamic is not what you'd expect, and he's protective but also overly aggressive, and she still doesn't quite listen to him. Like, I don't even know what to say about it, but it does not feel like something we normally see.
I loved that aspect of it, if I'm honest. I think that, clearly Belinda was a young mother, and you see that they have a friendship. And it reminded me of, in my, you know, 20s ish, coming home from, for school break and being like, am I going to have a cocktail in front of my mom? Like there's this kind of like seeing them as equals that can be a clunky experience, but I think for them it was kind of an elegant sort of expression of their relationship they've had their whole life. And at the end of the day, she's mom. She puts her foot down, and we see that when he's starts snooping around her sex life, and she's like enough. Like I think she's boundaried, but I think that those boundaries aren't something we get to see in this way all the time, which is really nice.
And she, of course, is not the only one who's back this season. We have Greg or Gary or whatever we want to call him. I'm sure John is a much nicer person in real life. He manages to play this really despicable, just not even necessarily menacing, just sort of unlikable person. I don't even like
Yeah,
it's what is it like getting to be with him, and why is he so good at this role?
he's so good at it because he's a great fucking actor. Season one, I didn't have any storylines with him, but if you recall, season one, we shot it in a bubble. So even if I wasn't in their storylines, we were all family having Thanksgiving together by the end of the day. So I got really close to him, and to be able to work with him to see his magic up close, it was horrifying. I remember in this scene specifically when he jump scares me as I'm walking to my room, when watching it with the rest of the world, jump scared in my own apartment. And I was just like, and being, he just has such control of a gaze, and there's just this threat of, it's menacing. And even on set when I was, I'm sitting there in my pink caftan with the purse in my lap, holding it like, an elderly person would on like a metro bus in New York. It wasn't because I was trying to do it. That's what he did to my body. I was so stiff. I was so terrified hearing his monologue in that moment and talking about what Tanya wanted for me, and could tell that he was saying nice things, but there was this kind of subtext of just like, there's a consequence if you don't play nice. He's just so good at playing that quiet disgust, I guess, or that kind of like seediness. He's brilliant.
You said that you were watching along with everyone else, so I'm curious whether you knew about it ahead of time or not. What storyline would you most like to have been part of if you could have been?
Um, I think the three girls. I read that I had the scripts before most of the actors. Like I said, I was cast before everyone, so I kind of knew what was going on. And I remember reading all the scripts, or binge reading all of them. And I FaceTimed Mike, who was scouting in Thailand at the time. And I was like, I'm obsessed. He's like, what do you think of your story? I was like, I love it. And I was just like, but these girls are vicious. And so many women I know are like, oh, I know a Jacqueline, I know a Lori, like I know these women. And Carrie Coon is just, I mean, a fine wine actor, like acting wise. She just gets better every time I see her. And just to see, they when I was in school, I studied a lot of Tennessee Williams, and the joke around the theater department was it was drama before there was air conditioning. So it meant for like very sort of like subtext heavy conversations, past the salt wasn't just past the salt. It was just like, I hate you, and your father is, the bane of my existence. So just the subtext that these ladies played with, it was just exquisite to see.
I want to pivot slightly to ask how you think we can get all these crazy White Lotus fans to go check out How to Die Alone.
I am scheming. I am scheming. We have. It's so funny. Folks who've seen the season and are looking for more Belinda in their lives have found the show and reached out in beautiful ways. And it's sad that it only got one season, but so much of how I hear it, it feels like a wonderful sort of balm. And people have watched it a couple times, and even though it ends on a cliffhanger, there's this emotional catharsis for Mel, who's the protagonist. And I think that, going back to it and watching it and it being something people check in on will always be there. So that's my saving grace.
Is there any hope for something in the future? We're sort of past that at this point.
Well, I think it's a little bit in the rearview mirror, but never say never. I mean, I think that there's always an opportunity, especially the industry is loves a reboot. So who knows what's in store with this gang? But I'm reminded of one of my favorite TV shows growing up, My So-Called Life, which had a short life as well. And I still pick it up, and it does right by me. So regardless of a future that is tangible, I'm just glad it exists. It's so hard to make television, original television these days. So I'm grateful I got the opportunity.
I'd also recommend people go back to Insecure because I feel like, Belinda is the tamest person on this show. And like to see on that, it's just such something I think would be very gratifying. People like Belinda didn't do enough to advocate or whatever. It's like, no, this is somebody who is not apologetic at all. Who, I love that. I really do.
They're so opposite and so in me. Like it's so funny. I my approach to the craft is I think we all possess the capacity for all emotion and all proclivities. And it just my Kelly is not at a 10. My Kelly is like maybe at a 1, 2 if I'm drinking. And my Belinda is a little bit higher on the dial. And so I have the capacity for both, but I miss Kelly so much because I for 5 seasons got to be that turned up in terms of just like getting fingered in a swingers diner, going to Coachella and pissing myself, and being dressed as Baps. It was just a wonderful recess for that part of myself. So hopefully audiences, if they're itching to see me do something a little bit more fiery, they can check out Insecure for sure.
Well, what's next for you, either in front of the screen or behind it?
Well, I have a lot of stuff cooking at Big Hattie Productions, which is exciting. Most notably, I won the rights in a very competitive bidding war for the Risa Tisa TikTok series, which is, for those that don't know, and if anyone doesn't know, you're living under a rock. It's a TikTok series that garnered 500 million impressions about a woman who got hustled and by her then husband. And how she came out on the other side kind of victorious and strong. And it was just one of the most vulnerable acts of the most radical acts of vulnerability that I'd ever seen. And so I'm excited to be playing her. It's my first sort of bio performance where the person is still living. So I'm excited for that. And I'm also producing alongside the incomparable Marty Noxon. So it's going to be a fun sort of journey. And we're in the very nascent stages of that right now. But that's taking up most of my time these days.
Well, my last question, the most common answer is The White Lotus, but what are you watching on TV right now?
I am watching Severance. I'm watching Paradise. Sterling K. Brown is just exquisite. I'm watching The Pit. And reruns of The Office. That is to the point where I think whoever's running that platform thinks something's wrong with me because I have it on. That's my comfort show.
You got a lot of clips on Facebook of The Office, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Friends. And Friends, like I remember everything. Brooklyn Nine-Nine I never watched, but I love the clips. And The Office, like there's a lot of later season stuff that like I might have written off because I wasn't as into it anymore, but it really just
it's just wonderful. I went to actually when I was shooting How to Die Alone, funnily enough, in Toronto, they had the Office experience, which was traveling the country where you have the entire set of The Office replicated for fans to go through, and you can pose and take pictures, and you're spilling Kevin's chili and you're at the wedding. And I went and I was just like, I'm very neurospicy in real life. And this was just like indulging every bit of my synapses that knew all of these weird, obscure details. But yeah, there's so many episodes where I'm like, oh yeah, this happens. But that's back when TV was 26 episodes. So they had a lot of food to feed us back then for sure.
it was that Jake Lacey, when I talked to him, said that like he remembers The Office, like when it was The Office, and then when he was on it, he was like, "Are these two the same thing?"
That's literally the first thing I said to him when I landed in Hawaii. I was just like, I'm going to try to be cool because I'm a huge Office fan. And he was like, was it? Was it still The Office when I was on it? I'm like, yes, it was still The Office. I want him and I want Patrick to be in a room together, and Theo James. I feel like, anyway, now I'm just dreaming.
I love that you're just as passionate a fan as you are an actress and creator. So it is always such a pleasure, and I look forward to the. I didn't know anything about this TikTok thing, so I look forward to finding out from the this will be my way into the story. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much.